Have you ever felt that nagging sense of unease, that internal friction, when your beliefs clash with your actions? That, my friends, is the essence of cognitive dissonance. It's the psychological discomfort we experience when holding conflicting beliefs, ideas, or values. Imagine this. You pride yourself on being environmentally conscious, yet you find yourself frequently driving alone in a gas-guzzling vehicle. This inconsistency creates a dissonance, a discord within your psychological house. Now, you might think, can I just ignore it? Well, you can try. But much like attempting to ignore a leaky faucet, the drip, drip, drip of cognitive dissonance will eventually demand your attention. Unresolved, it can manifest as stress, anxiety, and even impact your decision-making. But there's good news. By understanding and mastering cognitive dissonance, we can transform this internal struggle into a powerful catalyst for personal growth. We can learn to confront our inconsistencies, make necessary changes, and ultimately, build a more integrated and authentic self. Imagine for a moment a still pond. On a calm day, the water reflects the world above with perfect clarity. But toss a stone into the mix, and the image distorts. Our minds are much the same. When caught in the throes of cognitive dissonance, our thoughts and emotions roil, making it difficult to see clearly. This is where mindfulness comes in. It's about cultivating a detached observation of your internal landscape, much like a scientist observing a specimen under a microscope. You become aware of your thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations without judgment, without getting swept away by them. Now, mindfulness isn't about emptying your mind. It's about noticing. Notice that tension in your chest when you tell a white lie. Notice the flicker of guilt when you indulge in a guilty pleasure, despite your resolutions. This awareness, my friends, is the first crucial step towards resolving dissonance. Think of it as turning on the lights in a cluttered room. You can't clean up what you can't see. Similarly, you can't address cognitive dissonance until you develop the capacity to observe your internal state with honesty and clarity. We humans, we're remarkably adept at self-deception. We build elaborate psychological defenses to shield ourselves from uncomfortable truths, especially when those truths challenge our self-perception. When faced with cognitive dissonance, our first instinct is often to deny its existence altogether. We might rationalize our behavior, telling ourselves, it's just this one time, or everyone else is doing it. We might minimize the significance of the dissonance, brushing it off as no big deal. We might even project blame outwards, finding fault in others to avoid confronting our own inconsistencies. But here's the catch. Denial only perpetuates the cycle of dissonance. It's like burying a seed of discontent in the fertile ground of your psyche. It may seem dormant for a time, but eventually, it will take root and grow, manifesting in unexpected and often unhealthy ways. True growth requires us to face our discomfort head-on. It demands that we acknowledge the dissonance within and allow ourselves to truly feel the weight of our inconsistencies. Only then can we begin the process of genuine transformation. So you've begun to pay attention. You're becoming mindful of your internal state, noticing the tension, the discomfort of cognitive dissonance. Excellent. That's the first step. But awareness alone isn't enough. Now we have to play detective. We need to figure out what's actually clashing within your psyche. Think of it like this. Imagine two tectonic plates grinding against each other. That friction, that's your dissonance. To understand it, you need to identify the plates themselves, the conflicting beliefs or behaviors at play. This requires introspection, a willingness to look inward with ruthless honesty. What are the specific ideas, values, or actions that are at odds with each other? Perhaps you believe in environmentalism, but find yourself consistently engaging in unsustainable practices. Or maybe you value honesty above all else, yet you find yourself constantly telling small white lies to avoid conflict. These are the kinds of discrepancies we need to unearth if we want to resolve the dissonance that plagues us. We often find ourselves trapped within echo chambers of our own making. We surround ourselves with information that confirms our pre-existing biases, reinforcing our beliefs even when they might be flawed. This intellectual insulation might feel comforting, but it's a dangerous game. It's like building a house on a foundation of sand. It might seem stable for a while, but the first sign of a storm, the first challenging perspective, and the whole structure crumbles. To truly address cognitive dissonance, you need to break free from these echo chambers. You need to actively seek out information that challenges your assumptions, that forces you to confront the possibility that you might be wrong. This can be a difficult process. It requires humility, a willingness to admit that you don't have all the answers. But it's an essential step in personal growth and intellectual development. It's how we move beyond the limitations of our own limited perspectives and develop a more nuanced, sophisticated understanding of the world. Human beings are tribal creatures. We crave belonging, the comfort of shared values and beliefs. This is natural, even necessary for social cohesion. But this same tribal instinct can blind us to alternative perspectives, trapping us in echo chambers of agreement. To truly understand and address cognitive dissonance, you must be willing to venture beyond the familiar, to engage with those who hold different views, even those you might find initially disagreeable. This is not about sacrificing your principles or adopting a relativistic view of truth. It's about recognizing that no one individual, no single group, has a monopoly on truth. Engaging with diverse perspectives allows you to see the world through a wider lens, to understand the complexities and nuances that might be missed within the confines of your own tribe. Think of it like exploring a new city. You wouldn't limit yourself to a single street, a single neighborhood. You'd venture out, explore different districts, experience the city's diverse flavors and rhythms. The sixth rule for mastering cognitive dissonance, for putting yourself back together again after the chaotic realization that you might be wrong, is to engage in open and honest communication. Now, that's easier said than done, because most of us by the time we're adults, well, let's say we've learned the utility of not saying exactly what we think. But the problem with that is that you end up in a state where you're not exactly sure what you think. And if you want to think properly, you have to risk saying things to find out what needs to be said, and also to find out what you believe, because you don't think things through until you say them. You think them through as you say them. And that's partly why, I suppose, from a psychoanalytic perspective, that the talking cure actually works, because you have to say things to figure out what they mean. And so if you find yourself in a situation where you're feeling the pressure of cognitive dissonance, one of the things you can ask yourself is, have I really laid this out clearly to the people that I'm close to? And laid it out clearly doesn't mean ranting and raving at them. It means presenting your perspective as clearly and reasonably as you possibly can, and listening to their objections and their counter-arguments. Because it's often the case, and this is something that people I think rarely consider, that the best way to develop a strong argument in favor of your own position is to listen carefully to someone who opposes it. The seventh principle for managing cognitive dissonance, for putting the pieces of yourself back together after you've dared to discover your own ignorance, is to make a conscious decision to change your behavior or your beliefs. Now that's a really hard one, and I'm not saying it's easy, because people are unbelievably resistant to change. There's a million reasons for that. One is that changing your mind is an admission of being wrong, and people don't like to be wrong. It's also an implicit admission that you've wasted your time, and people really don't like to feel that they've wasted their time. And so they'll cling to their ideas like grim death, even in the face of overwhelming contradictory evidence. But look, here's the thing. You're going to be wrong a lot. And the longer you live, the more wrong you're going to be. And so you might as well get good at it. You might as well practice it. And one way to practice it is to make a conscious decision to change your behavior or your beliefs, particularly when you encounter new information that challenges your existing views. Now, that doesn't mean you have to change your mind every time someone disagrees with you. That's another form of insanity. But it does mean that you should be open to the possibility that you might be wrong, and that you should be willing to change your mind when presented with sufficient evidence. The eighth rule for managing the cognitive dissonance that emerges as an inevitable consequence of attempting to live a meaningful life is to take small, consistent steps towards alignment. So you've decided that maybe what you're doing isn't working, or that maybe what you believe isn't right. What do? Well, you don't need to tear your entire life apart. In fact, that's a bad idea. It's a bad idea for the simple reason that if you try to change everything at once, you'll fail, and then you'll be demoralized and more likely to give up on the entire process. The best way to change is slowly and consistently. And the best way to proceed is by picking a single, small thing that you can do. You might think, well, if I'm just going to pick one small thing, it's so small, what good is it going to do? And the answer to that is, well, it's not going to do much good today, and it's not going to do much good tomorrow. But if you keep doing it, day after day, week after week, month after month, it will do an unbelievable amount of good. And the reason for that is that what you're actually doing is altering your habit structure. You're changing the way you act in the world, and that's far more powerful than a simple change in belief. Because, the things you believe are revealed in the way you act, and if you change the way you act, you change the way you see the world. Now, as you continue to wrestle with cognitive dissonance and strive for personal growth, it's absolutely crucial to acknowledge your progress. You're taking on a challenge, confronting your deeply held beliefs, your ingrained habits, and that's no small feat. It's a testament to your character, your strength, that you're willing to engage in this process. Remember, the road to integrating conflicting beliefs, to resolving cognitive dissonance, it's not a straight line. There will be setbacks, moments of regression, perhaps even times when you feel like giving up entirely. And that's perfectly normal. It's part of the process. What separates those who truly grow from those who remain stuck is the ability to recognize those setbacks not as failures, but as opportunities for learning. Each time you catch yourself slipping back into old patterns, each time you find yourself overwhelmed by dissonance, it's not a sign that you're failing. Quite the opposite. It's an opportunity to understand the triggers, the situations, the thoughts that lead to that dissonance. It's a chance to refine your strategies, to dig deeper into the underlying causes of your discomfort. So celebrate your victories, no matter how small they may seem. Acknowledge the effort you're putting in. And when you encounter those inevitable setbacks, greet them with curiosity, not despair. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How can I use this experience to move forward more effectively? Now, as we delve further into the process of mastering cognitive dissonance, it's absolutely crucial to address the role of self-compassion. You see, when confronting deeply ingrained beliefs and behaviors, when challenging the very foundations of your worldview, it's all too easy to fall into the trap of self-criticism, to berate yourself for past mistakes, for perceived shortcomings. This type of negative self-talk, this harsh inner critic, it can be incredibly destructive. It undermines your self-esteem, it fuels feelings of inadequacy, and ultimately, it sabotages your efforts at personal growth. It's like trying to climb a mountain with a heavy weight strapped to your back. You might make some progress, but the burden will eventually become too much to bear. So how do we cultivate self-compassion? It begins with recognizing that you, like every other human being, are imperfect. You will make mistakes, you will stumble, you will fall short of your own expectations. And that's okay, it's part of the human condition. It's what makes you relatable, it's what makes you capable of growth. Instead of judging yourself harshly for your imperfections, try to approach yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would offer to a close friend or a loved one. Imagine a friend came to you, struggling with the same challenges, the same dissonance that you're facing. Would you berate them, criticize them, tell them they're not good enough? Of course not. You would offer them compassion, support, and encouragement. We've covered a lot of ground in this series, exploring the nature of cognitive dissonance, its impact on our lives, and most importantly, the strategies we can employ to harness its power for personal growth. We've talked about the importance of mindfulness, of acknowledging and accepting our feelings of discomfort, of actively seeking out diverse perspectives, and challenging our own assumptions. We've discussed the need for open and honest communication, for making conscious decisions that align with our values, and for taking consistent, incremental action towards our goals. And we've explored the crucial role of self-compassion and forgiveness in this journey of self-discovery and transformation. Remember, mastering cognitive dissonance is not about achieving a state of perfect consistency or eliminating all discomfort from our lives. That's not only unrealistic, it's undesirable. It's the tension, the dissonance that fuels our growth, that propels us forward on the path of self-improvement. The key is to approach this process with courage, with curiosity, and with a deep and abiding sense of self-compassion. Embrace the discomfort, learn from your setbacks, and never underestimate your capacity for growth and transformation.